So in today's video, I'm going to be going over doing the rear brakes on a 2013 Chevy Equinox. Most GM rear brakes like this system are going to be similar. You have your rear disc brakes that I'm going to do today, and then you have the parking brake assemblies, which I'm going to show you what to look for to make sure those are working properly and look okay. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Let me know in the comment section if you have any questions or if you have any comments on how I do the job. Okay, so quickly I'm going to go over the tools I used for the job. 1/2-inch impact gun with 22mm socket, 14 or 15 gear wrench to get the caliper brackets off quicker. It's a 15mm bolt. Use a 14 to get off the caliper itself. I doubled these up to break them loose. I don't think you need to, but you can if you've ever double wrenched before. I'll show you real quick. This is a T30 Torx bit. Use that to get off the rotors. Brake caliper tool, depressing tool, my electric gun, trusty electric gun, and then a hammer to hammer off the rotors. So here we go. Okay, I already got the wheels off, but that's pretty self-explanatory. If you have an impact gun, just break the lug nuts loose. If you don't, loosen them up on the ground, then lift it up and take them off. Right here, these two are 14mm, so I'm going to start with that. Okay, first step is to break these loose. They're 14s. So if you want to double wrench it up, obviously lefty loosey, you're going to go like so. And then you're going to use this end to get your leverage. It's helped a lot getting difficult stuff loose. Pop it loose. These ones luckily are not very tight, so this guy takes pretty good care of his car, so I don't mind working on it. If you do all your maintenance when it's due, usually it saves you a little bit of money. Get both these loose. And this just pops right off. Again, if the vehicle's been maintained, and depending on your system. If they wait until this is destroyed, it might be a little bit more difficult to get them off. Take the brake pads off. As you can see, right at around here, it's like 3 to 4mm left, but it's to the point where you would recommend it. The last thing you want is somebody to go on a road trip and then have to get their car fixed. So the next thing you're looking at, took these bolts off with the sliders on them. Next bolts you're going to take off, if you can see them, these right here, your caliper bracket bolts that bolt the actual caliper on. There's 2 bolts. Just take those off next. Again, this is where my breaker bar tool comes into play. Make sure you're on loose setting. Do right leverage. Breaker loose. The reason why I love this tool is it's super ratcheting. It's got a ton of teeth in it. So you can do barely a little bit back turns and still get a turn on it. Got the 2 bolts out. Take this off. Next thing is depress the caliper. Okay, I took those 2 bolts out. Got the caliper bracket off. Next thing is I'm going to depress the caliper itself. Okay, using my tool. Here. This tool's super easy. I would recommend buying it if you're going to do a brake job. It's going to save money if you do it yourself anyways. And this will make it a lot easier. C-clamp's fine too. Okay, got that pressed in. Next step is putting the new pads. Next step is lubricating everything. Then we're going to take this off. Sometimes it comes off pretty easily. As you can see, this one, again, it's been pretty well maintained. He's done his maintenance, so tire rotations, all that stuff comes right off. The reason I'm replacing the rotors, you could turn the rotors or resurface them. I'm replacing them because he burnt through the other side to metal. I already checked to make sure that the sliders and everything else were working as well as the caliper. So I'm just going to replace them both in pairs. Get them out of here. That's metal on metal. That is not safe. That is not what you want. Okay, next step is to get everything ready to be put back on. We have a wire harness here from a Subaru that the guy didn't throw away yet. So careful. Modelo Especial. Okay, so next step is getting the rotors out. Thing that I always do with the roters, what you should do, you can use the spray cleaner. We use brake clean. Obviously, gets it off a little faster. Shake, spray, wipe it down. Flip it over, same thing. They glaze the rotors when they sell them with some like oil stuff just to protect them, I guess. I don't know. If you know, put it in the comment section. I clean it off because there is a chance if you leave this residue on, it'll cause the brake pads to heat up, not seat properly, and then you'll have noise, you'll have other issues. So clean this up, make sure this is fully dry and you get a good metal to metal contact when you're putting everything back together. Next thing is lubricating the caliper brackets. So whenever you're lubricating this stuff, make sure that you have, I do it one at a time. That way I know which one goes where. Sometimes they go to a specific spot. I don't know why, but make sure to keep them in the same spot. I use a brush to put my grease on, just grease it up. The more grease, the better, okay? I just put a layer all the way around, make sure that it's not all rusty and crusted up, because if it is, then you gotta clean it off. These are in pretty good shape. Same thing with this one. It's not all dried up, so just put another layer on there. We're good to go. Done. The next step you're looking for is making sure that you're inspecting the parking brake assembly. So as you can see, you have a good amount of thickness left in the pad. If this is metal to metal with this piece, then you're gonna need to recommend these, okay? Either recommend them or you're gonna have to replace them. You don't wanna get in here and not replace them, unless you don't care about your parking brake. That's up to you. Okay, so next step, put the rotor back on. Make sure you're putting this piece lined up with where the hole goes. That way you can tighten back up. Okay, so the other thing is, the next thing, put your caliper bracket back on. And the other thing is, you can replace the hardware. I don't replace it unless the old hardware is so worn out to the point that the pad is actually loose, which I'll show you. Bolts back started. And if you're inexperienced, I would recommend getting a torque wrench to torque it to the proper specs. Most smaller SUVs, like this is an Equinox, a 3/8. Decently long ratchet is going to do the trick. It's going to get it tight enough, and you're going to be fine. But if you're not sure, you should get a torque wrench and check the specs. So I just basically get my hand to the end of it, use my body weight, give it a couple jabs. The only way you're really going to break a bolt like this, because you're tightening it too much, is if you use like a 1/2 inch. This is a 3/8 size. 1/2 inch is gonna be bigger, and then you're gonna have to like crank it to break it. So just use a 3/8 ratchet, tighten it as good as you can get it. You should be fine. Okay. So the brake pads, I always put them where the wear sensor is. Obviously where it gets to a certain point where it's making noise. I always put it on the inside. Typically the inside pads wear out a little bit faster, and going with, as you're rotating forward, it's gonna reach the very end of the peak. The other ways that I put it, for whatever reason, sometimes they make noise or they don't fit properly, but on the inside, on the top, is where it fits perfectly almost every time. Secure the pads. Okay, so the next step is I'm going to lubricate the caliper where it rides on the brake pads. That's key. I don't overly lubricate this area or this area. I do the caliper because I know for sure that's going to be what's hitting the brake pads. My brush, put a thin layer, put it on the inside and the outside where it grabs the actual, makes contact with the actual brake pads. This is also actually good for the rubber seal inside the caliper because it's lubricating it and it's also protecting it. So as you get dirt and brake dust buildup, it can potentially cut a hole in that actual rubber, which is not what you want. So this adds a little layer of protection. You never want holes in your rubber. Don't forget that. Don't ever forget that. Okay. Last thing is the 2 caliper bolts. Go back through here. Get them started. They're 14s. Okay. 14s. Just tighten them up. Get them as tight as you can by hand. And then tighten them up. These are much smaller bolts, so you do not need to tighten the crap out of them. Just get them snug, get them a couple pops. The other thing you want to watch for is that the other side of it, where it has like these nuts in the actual caliper itself, the bolts or the receiver for the slider, make sure this is not turning as you're tightening it, because then you know it's not fully tight. Last thing, so the tires back on, go test drive it, torque the wheels, test drive it, and you're good to go. All right guys, so the only things left are doing the other side, putting the wheels back on, torquing them to specs. I think on the Equinox, smaller SUVs, it's usually right around 100 to 120 foot-pounds of torque, so make sure you have a torque wrench and tighten it. The only other thing is the hardware. So a lot of you guys say replace the hardware every time. I specifically don't, because every time I replace it, it doesn't fit perfectly and it ends up scraping and making noise. The old hardware usually fits just right. I do replace it if there's too much play in the brake pad. So when you're actually moving the brake pad around, when you put the new ones on, if there is play, you should replace them, because they're gonna make noise from going to reverse to drive. So if you hear noise going from backwards to forwards, usually means there's too much play in your hardware and they're going back and forth. Other than that, if the hardware is rusty and damaged, you should replace it then as well. But for the most part, your brakes are gonna work fine even without hardware. It's just a noise issue. So I hope you guys liked the video. Please, if you have any questions, hit that comment section, let me know. The caliper tool is a little bit wonky to use, so make sure to use it carefully, press the calipers back in, and always take the cap off the reservoir, the brake fluid reservoir. Take the cap off before you even start the job, because that will make sure that you actually don't press brake fluid anywhere. Some guys say to press brake fluid to open up the caliper so brake fluid goes out of the caliper. You can do that. I haven't done it that way and haven't really had any problems with my stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe so I can start making more videos, and let me know if you want to see anything. Thanks guys.